Hello, welcome to another episode of GI Joe New News Review. I'm here for with my special guest, Hawk Sanders, publisher of Rising Sun Comics, and all-around great guy. Uh, this is part two of our series of discussions. We discussed last episode Action Force Redux. So before we begin, let me ask how that's doing, the Kickstarter.
Well, David, thanks for having me back. The Kickstarter is doing okay at the moment. I think we're setting at about 4,500 at the moment, so we're about halfway. Still have about 25 days to go. So there's plenty of time to jump in and grab some of those exclusives. Again, I can throw the link down below, and anyone watching this can jump over and pledge. There's plenty to grab there.
It's great. I'm looking forward to it. I'm thinking about the Action Force material that I ordered. I went on the website the other day, and I showed my partner. I said, "Hey, this could be some good Christmas gifts for me on this website. All this Action Force stuff. I don't have it. Can maybe if you had any thoughts for stocking stuffers or whatever?" And he's okay. Thanks. I appreciate you letting me see that. So, anybody watching this that want to give your loved ones Christmas ideas, go to the Rising Sun Comics publishing website. What is that, Hawk?
Yeah, you can go to risingsuncomics.com. Just click on the store. It's going to link you over to a new link, which I think we're going to talk about that later. And there you'll find all of the products in which we sell all of our books. You can actually separate them down if you scroll down the page. It has a little tabs that you can click on, and it'll separate out by GI Joe product, or Red Dawn, or any one of the others that are listed there. So
Cool, great.
yeah.
So, this episode we're going to discuss, of all things, GI Joe, and you might wonder, okay, GI Joe, but what are we going to talk about? First, we're going to go through a bunch of the projects that you're working on currently, or Rising Sun Comics are involved, or Rising Sun Publishing is involved with. First, we're going to go through Action After Action Report Volume 2, which is finally out. It's being shipped to you guys out there, so you don't have to text me and ask me where it is. It's out, it's ready to go. It's absolutely beautiful. There's so much more in here. I'm still reading interviews with Josh Blaylock and all the different guys, different insights into Devil's Due and comics in general that you'll all find really interesting and engaging. So that's out. And the Kickstarter for Volume 3 has been funded. That is now still going. In fact, I think there's a few more days left on that, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think we still have about 15 days or more left still on it. So you've got room to get some goodies through that one as well. If you haven't bought all these books, this is the best way to get it. You can get volume 1, 2, and 3 all together through the Kickstarter. And I it's so weird when you work on a product and then you find yourself using your own work as reference. And I've done this, and I know Josh has done this, and now Larry Hama is doing this as well. So it's like, okay, we're all using this thing that was so desperately needed in our community, a PIP, which is a picture-in-picture display, comic cover by comic cover, a perfect guide to be able to collect your comics and know what you've got.
and the funny thing is, me being a comic aficionado myself, and I would say 99 per, I'm not going to say even 100%, 98% of the material. I felt anybody that's a GI Joe collector must have all this material. Why do we need a book about it? But I was flat wrong on that, because there was so much more in this than just the comics. There is material that I didn't even know existed, foreign material, variant covers, different variations in different parts of the world, with the Indicia and things like that. There's just so much. I can't. Interviews, very insightful interviews that I really enjoy reading. There's so much stuff in it. I can't even tell you all the stuff. This volume two, you guys, when you get this volume two, it is chock full of stuff that you would never even imagine was in it. There's only one odd thing in there that I was surprised, and maybe I'm overlooking it, but the Devil's Due first 25 issues had back covers that were done by this artist, and I'm blanking on his name.
John Michael
Beautiful,
Beck.
huh?
Michael Beck, wasn't it?
Like Michael Beck, right? Beautiful painted art. It's kind of like a gallery of all the Joes and Cobras at the time that they were using, but he did not include these covers in the book. He did with the posters, which I volunteered my poster collection for him to put in the book. Josh, when him and Roger were visiting me, but he didn't put the all this art in there, and I thought that was kind of a disservice to Michael Beck to a certain extent. And maybe I'm missing it in here, but I looked through this 5 or 6 times thoroughly, and I have not found it yet.
I think the reason I think the reason why I believe we had this discussion when in its creation, but I believe the reason why it wasn't included was because in all of the other reprints of it, every time it had to go back to reprint, they kept the back cover the same, so it never actually adjusted off, and it didn't make it a variation from the original printing. Now, I think that probably should have been something Devil's Due should have done at the time, is that left the John Michael Beck cover as only as first printings or a limited run set and removed it off. But, I think that's why it was, I think that's why Josh had and Roger had done it.
Uh, okay, well, that's fine. I was just curious about that, and I haven't had an opportunity to chat with either Josh Eggman or Roger Taft about that. But now I have a question to ask him down the road.
But I
So
can talk about those as well. So yes, Rising Sun is working with Josh and Roger, and we're their publisher. So we're putting out the after action report, and as well as the character guide that's coming up, and a few other projects that are coming up as well. There it is, the character guide. So we'll be talking about command files, hopefully, in this as well. But we've been working with them to be able to put out the comic collecting books. So we worked on issue 1, 2, and now 3. And obviously, we're hoping that we're going to get the right funding, because we're looking for the funding to get us through to 4, 5, and maybe 6 and 7. If it's successful, because there's still plenty to cover. You wouldn't think that there's that much GI Joe comics out there, but there is, and I'm so happy about it.
yeah, yeah, because I this is something that I've been debating with them for since they did the initial or the announcement that they were doing the initial Kickstarter. I've been going back and forth, and they know this. I've been a nagging Nelly to them about why they left out the original GI Joe comics from the '60s, which there was only 2. But then in the '70s, Marvel Comics did these pages of the action team with Joe Colton, Bullet Man, and all
Yeah.
these cool characters. They did like 12 of them, I think, like that. And that material wasn't included either. And I'm like, why didn't you just tack that at the beginning before Larry's and put it in the introduction or something? But now we're on to like the 4th and 5th volumes, and we've still yet to cover that material. And there's a lot of other material. That's
Oh
just the tip of the iceberg of the material that's out there that you could cover. But
yeah.
they've done a lot. That's the thing. These 3, the first 2 volume and the 3rd volume has a lot of stuff in it. It's just not all of it.
This is it. There's so much. And I remember us talking. Well, I remember that conversation 100%. Josh and I were talking about it, and it was like, okay, should we include the pack-in comics that went with the original 12-inch GI Joe? Because we've got a list of them all, and I've got a pretty exclusive, rundown of them. I've even got reprints of them, because I'm a 12-inch collector as well. So, and I think that it kind of it ended up falling out of the scope, that there wasn't quite enough room to cover everything. So I think that stuff is going to show up, but it's probably going to show up a little bit later. There's talks now that we're actually running out of issue one, or that we will run out of issue one. So there's talking about doing a reprint of it and making a couple adjustments. So we're thinking about maybe slipping some of that stuff in there, but we don't know how just yet to do it.
Here's an idea. You could do a 0 as a stretch goal and have all
Ooh,
the material, and it could be really a smaller thing that you could add as a stretch goal, and that could be your 0. So if you do a
interesting.
box set down the line, you could do 0, 1, 2, 3, blah blah blah.
And then it can cover all of those advertisement pieces that you're talking about, which were actually comics in advertisement. Like, see, I was really kind of pushing for like Sergeant Savage. What most people don't realize is it came with a comic, which
It
is
did.
in the book, right? It's in our book. But actually, and he talks about the card backs, but yet the card backs had unique art created for every card back that had a comic story in it. And this isn't even including all of the other comic stuff, the stuff that was done for 2010, the stuff that was done for Double Duty. Like, there's a lot of stuff that were,
And those Sergeant Savage were done by Joe Kubert. Why wouldn't you want to showcase a legend like him? He did the original 2 DC comics back in the 60s when G.I. Joe first got its launch. He did
yeah,
those 2 comics. So it would be the perfect synergy of the two things. So I
right.
don't know. It's just one of those
Well,
weird things.
no, it's exciting. It's exciting to me because Josh and Roger did put it in there. It is in there about the card backs, but it doesn't. I think I would have maybe seen like more of the card backs and talked about the kind of the different art. But you can read the article, guys. Go check out the book. That's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to after action report. These things are amazing. I and I'm like you. I thought I had a complete collection, and I get into it, and I'm like, "Whoa, wait a second, Josh, where'd this come from?" Or, wait a second, Roger, but are you kidding me? So there was all this content that was being thrown in, and it was like, "Whoa, whoa!" It was blowing my mind about how
And
much
but that's
extra
the
was in this book.
but that's the thing. Now I'm like trying to find some of the stuff I didn't have. So
Yeah.
I just ordered 2 things off eBay that was in the first, I think the second book. Now that I have the second book, I found 2 things from the early 2000s from the Joe vs. Cobra and Valor vs. Venom era, 2 books that were like children's books that I didn't have. And I went and got them off of eBay this last week. If Todd, if you're listening to this, they're just extra little things. They didn't cost that much.
so, so then yeah, you've got to clarify. Let's not get you in any trouble here. So that
So, okay.
um, go ahead. I'll let you go ahead. I'll
So then, oh, one of my figures fell down. Oh, sorry. Then we are working on the G.I. Joe. Stay there.
actually, before we jump into that, let me talk about the character guide that's coming up.
Oh, this. Okay.
Real quick, and then we could jump into that.
Okay.
So this command files is coming up, and this is going to be something I think that is in desperate need for our community. I deal with a lot of artists, and sometimes these artists may not be as in depth GI Joe fans as maybe yourself or myself, and they might not know everything. And I think that there's a real miscommunication of what characters what, and how, which ones are official, which ones are not, especially when they go to Google and they put in a search, and a lot of custom figures come up, so they don't know which one looks like which. So this is a project that we're getting underway called Command Files, and this is to help as a character identification guide. So what we're working on is to try and put together a character identification guide to help the process of someone that might be coming in or someone that needs the extra information for a character identification. And of course, it's going to cover some basic information off their file cards, things like that. So we're hoping that'll come out. The GI Joe volume is what we're working on right now, and then we might do a Cobra volume after that. We'll see. So
And we discussed this somewhat. Yourself, me, Josh, the gentleman that is working on it, and I'm
Greg,
blanking on his name. Uh,
his name is Greg.
Greg Augustin. And I have a really strong uh, interest in this, only due to the fact that there has been these types of things in the past. Marvel has done it, DC has done it with their Who's Who. GI Joe has done it with their Order of Battle, and then Devil's Due did two or three different versions of this same thing. The
Correct.
comics actually had it as well. The later comics of the original Larry Hama run in the 110 to 140s. I think they did it in the back of each issue. So it's been done many different ways, not only for GI Joe, for big companies like DC and Marvel. My concern is how you're going to do it. If you're just going to do GI Joe, and there's fans that, which it probably isn't, I'm just using this as a barometer, that might just get GI Joe. They might not get Cobra, or they might not just get Dreadnought, so they might not. The way that these other ones, they mixed and match, like you might get a GI Joe, a Cobra, a Dreadnought, Iron Grenadier, an unproduced character, a vehicle, a play set, blah blah blah, in one volume. So you're getting one of every single thing in the thing. And then there was several volumes. By the end of it, you had a whole series, and you had all the good guys, all the bad guys, all the vehicles, all the blah blah blah, and all, so on and so forth. So that's the thing that concerns me, is the way that this is being done and how it's being done, because there was gatefolds, like I have a volume over here that I could actually bring it out and show you. Gatefolds of like big things, big characters, or headquarters, to show blueprints of the details inside, like a piece of equipment or this or that. And they were double sided. So it not only had a character profile in the beginning, it showed other variations of the character on the other side, and a little bit more of the history, major story elements. So that's the type of thing I'm concerned with this, is, are we putting all of our um, effort, and that may be not the right word, because I know you're putting your effort into it, and you're trying to put out the best product, but that's the only word that comes to mind when I'm talking about this, is the best effort for it, putting our best foot forward, and making this the ultimate GI Joe guide that it could possibly be.
Well, and I think that's kind of the key. And I'm gonna revert back to the beginning and break that down. So in all of those versions, in the Marvel version, in the IDW version, and all of that, none of them were a complete set. You didn't have any of those complete characters. Even in the late Marvel run, you got bits and pieces of the characters. You never got there was never a complete set ever done. Even whenever Vellum versus Venom had done it, they didn't have a complete set. There's a book out there that you can get
I
that's
have
pretty
that.
thick, and it does the same thing, but it doesn't give you a complete set.
No, it isn't.
So what we're doing is we are going to do different versions on the back. We're looking into showing you what these different versions are. So that way, the different, you know, not custom versions. These are versions that were actually printed in media, so that you can follow through what's going on. This is Lady J from Resolute. This is Lady J from Devil's Due. This is Lady J from 2000 Leagues Under the Sea. You know,
And
but so the point is to get a comprehensive, complete list together of all the characters where you can find them all in one place. And I think that's kind of what we've decided to do, was maybe focus on GI Joe first, because it's going to be somewhere around 350 pages of content. Crank it up. and then we're going to come around for Cobra and Dreadnoks and all of the enemies in a second volume, is what we were truly thinking. But that was our thing, was is that we were hoping that you got the one volume and it had it all there. But I can see your point. If we break it apart, do some GI Joe and some Cobra in each one, then you can do volume 1, 2, 3, and if more is added, you could go 3, 4, 5, and just keep adding to the series. Obviously, you know.
yeah, and I think because the fact alone that there are characters that have probably hundreds, maybe versions, Snake Eyes, Cobra Commander, Duke. You're not going to be able to cover all their major versions on one thing. So if you do Snake Eyes version 1 and then the different variations, the animated version, the toy version, the comic version, blah blah blah, up to a certain point, then you do Snake Eyes version 2 with Timber, that version and their animated version, their different versions in toy and comic, and then version 3 and version 4 and version 5. Because Snake Eyes is a character you would have 6 or 7 uh, uh, things of. Cobra Commander, Duke, Roadblocks. Certain characters would need that because you're not going to fit them all on one page.
Right.
But then, like, say, Dr. Venom, he didn't have much of a career. He got killed off in issue like 16 or something like that. So that would be a guy you could do one page for. Quinn, another one pager. A lot of these figures, you could do one pages of the characters that are figures. But the series as a whole, I think you're pigeonholing yourself to just do Cobra and just do G.I. Joe. If you did it as a series of packs of leaflets and sold them commercially, and got Hasbro's backing, I'm positive they would back something like that because it helps the audience out there understand the characters and the toys and the versions of the character so they're not confused. It's the same thing with the vehicles. There's different Sky Strikers, different Awe Strikers, different Vamps, different models. It's the same thing.
Well, it's definitely something we can table at the next discussion, and actually after I finish here, I'll be talking to a different team, but we can table it at a discussion and talk about how it's going to break down and what that might look like for certain. I'm definitely open. It's not in print yet, so we definitely want to put out the best product that we can. And I know that people are going to be excited for this, and I know it's needed in our GI Joe universe. So, as long as it's all inclusive, that's the thing that I want to make sure that we're doing. We can't be leaving bits and pieces off because maybe someone doesn't like it in that part of their universe, but that doesn't mean that it's not included. You know what I mean?
But that's the thing, though. If you look at the DC and the Marvel Who's Who and Marvel Universe handbooks, there are such vague, obscure characters that they put in there that only might have had a handful of appearances in the 80 years that Marvel's existed, in the 80 years that DC, but they have a file. There's a file on that character because they wanted to be just like you. This Marvel volume that I'm talking about is 250 volumes, and there was probably 30 pages in each of those. I've been wanting to show Josh. We've had different opportunities to talk, and I was going to show it to him. I have one right here. I could show you just the space, the cosmic volume of the Marvel Universe. That one alone, all the different characters, vehicles, accessories, blah 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 blah. It's this thick.
Wow. That
You don't have to end. It could be going for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's needed in our universe. It really is because there's so much out there. And for those of you that are watching online, Yojo is kind of disintegrating. I'm certain everyone's noticing that. So everyone's everyone should, and they should move over to 3D Joes and have 3D Joes be the true place. Carson is heading that up. So Yojo pages aren't opening. It hasn't been updated in a long time. So it's really dissolving and falling apart. And the more time goes, those HMTLs get broke, and we can't get back to some of those pages. So so this is obviously 3D Joe's is a great place. There's several other sites out there that are putting for a place where you can find your characters. This is meant to be for something that you can put on your shelf. And you don't necessarily have to get on the web or get on your phone. You could just flip through and find the character. No Google search necessary. You don't have to worry about getting it wrong or running across something you don't want to see whenever you search up some of these characters' names.
And I think it desperately is needed because as you were saying, you don't want people to think that a version of a toy is a legitimate version when it's really not. You want to have the in continuity, whether it be animation, whether it be comic book, whether it be the toy, those three barometers as your staples of what that character is supposed to be. And I think that is important. And with all the new fans that are coming in, Classified is bringing in a lot of new fans. And I think the fans, based off the visuals, they're going back with retro, but when they started, they had these new versions. So I think it's confusing the fans that are new as to what the iconic variation of those characters are. I think Hasbro's trying their best to encapsulate all of those core elements to create that, but they're going back a little retro right now. I wish they would go back to the middle more and take elements from the classic and new elements and kind of merge it as a unique thing. But that's a whole nother discussion. I won't get too far into that. So I am very passionate about this particular project that you guys have got going on, and I'm going to be very involved talking to Josh and you guys about it in the future. So I'm very excited. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So then, did you have something else?
No, you're good.
So we're going to go into the next GI Joe item, and this was the free preview of the GI Joe Fan Club Live first issue preview at AR a couple weeks ago, and it's really good based off of what I've seen in it. And what I've talked with James Kavanaugh and people that I know are contributing articles, it looks really good. The first, there's a Grunt article in here, if I can get to that page. A cool bio on Grunt. Can't really get, there you go, you can see Grunt. And there's some interesting other material too. Battle article on Battleship. But there's all kinds of other neat stuff. But that's just the beginning of what that's going to be. I believe it's going to be 16 pages. And I believe that the first issue is in the mail or going to be in the mail.
It should be in pretty quick. So we're working with James Kavanaugh. If you guys don't know, he's running the new GI Joe Fan Club Mobile Strike Force. And we've got a pretty good following right now. We've been putting together kits, and just so you know that my involvement with it is I am special projects designer on that. Brian Sauer actually set up the file that you're looking at, and we're kind of like working side by side with James as publishing and helping to get that through. So we're also working on things like comics because we're Rising Sun Comics. So that's going to be coming out before long. Oh, you're going to show a sample of it. Okay, go ahead.
So this is the first one. It was a preview comic that he was putting out to test the waters last year. And he was showing people at Joe Fest and then AR. I got one 2 Joe Fest ago. And it's the further adventures of G.I. Joe. And this is going to be the continuation of the G.I. Joe continuity from which point of view? I'm not entirely sure.
This is really coming from the Collectors Club. So it's going to be a continuation of the Collector Club. So there's several people that are working on this, and this came to us obviously from the outside. And I'm just kind of running like an editor on the book and publishing it, through the fan club and through Rising Sun via all of this. So this is a continuation of where the fan club dropped off. So all those comics you didn't get in the fan club in 2018, this continues that story on through. And it has the original, everyone that worked on it originally have come back to complete this. And this is just one of the volumes. So if you have this one that's just shown, you throw that back up, David. So if you have this version actually has less content than the new version that's coming out. So you'll want to get both of them if you can find them. This is considered first printing. The next one will be considered a second printing. So that's how we're setting it up. There's extra content in it. And like I said, this is all done by the same art team, the same, everything's the same from the original GI Joe Collectors Club in 2018. We're going to continue on that story. Now, I know that there's already volumes 2 and 3 in the works. I'm seeing those pages. We're going to work on that. So it's not just a one thing. This is going to be a slow continuing series as we work through our fan club to be able to get it out. And the if you could hold back up the newsletter. So this is a preview of the newsletter that we've been working on. Brian Sauer set all of this up. Obviously, there's a lot of contributors that are putting in, and I want to be clear about this because this is our club. If you're a GI Joe fan and you're watching this is our club. It's not my club. It's not James's club. It's our club. We want you to contribute. We want you to be a part of it. We want you to grow with us. We want to get out there so we can get product back in your hands. And the only way we can do that is if we all stand together and support the brand that we love. So this is the way to do it. That's a black and white sample that was an exclusive printing for AR this year. And, the one that you'll get in your kit will be a newsletter. Actually, the new kits will be opening up soon. So hopefully we're going to get those out, as well as we're working on the second, third, and fourth newsletter for our club. So if you're interested in the club, and this has been talked about on the show before, but if you're interested, you can go to the GI Joe Fan Club and you can join up, and you'll get 4 newsletters and an exclusive package kit. And I know you may be looking at it saying, well, there's not GI Joe vehicles or toys in it. You got to hold on. It's coming. You got to be patient, but we still need your help. The more of us bind together, the more we can get done. So I can tell you that in those few newsletters that are coming up, there's some really good articles from people that you don't want to miss from this for. And I'm working on those interviews to kind of work out this stuff and some big things down the road. So stick
Some of
with
the
us.
people I believe that are in them, Justin Bell, who used to write for the other GI Joe Fan Club comic book, James. Oh God, he told me a few people. I can't remember everybody's name that he said was in the first issue, which is he said was open for me to let people know that they're coming, but I can't remember all of them.
Yeah. Justin is writing a piece we're calling GI Joe declassified section, because it follows kind of the GI Joe declassified section. And we actually had a couple really good artists come in and actually do some renderings for that. And I think that article is not in there in that printing that you're seeing, but it kind of showcases unique stories and things like that. And if you don't know Justin, he's been a part of our community for a long time. He's a really good friend, and he's actually a fully published author. That he come out of the GI Joe community and started writing his own books, and he's gotten some real good traction. And now he's come back on to write GI Joe once again, and he's actually wrote official product as well. I think, hasn't he?
Yep, he wrote part of the role playing game.
That's right. Yeah.
For Renegade Game Studios.
Cold Snap, was it?
This. He's got some credits in this volume. This is volume 2, Cold Iron, Operation Cold Iron. He's got a credit in there. And he has his own website because he goes back to the old forum days with generalsjoes.com. So Justin Bell is one of the old school. When you say old school, not that he's old, but OG fan club group members. He goes way back.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're and I don't, I guess it's just me. I don't consider it old school, but maybe that's because I'm a part of the old guard. Who knows? But yeah. So this project is going to be ongoing. We're looking forward to year 2. You're gonna love these when you get them in your hand. It's really exciting stuff. It's exciting that we've got a club again. That's exciting. And there are other clubs out there. So guys, if you're looking around and you don't know where to join, there are several clubs around the United States. This club that we're working on now is an effort to join us all together. We're accepting of all clubs and all aspects of GI Joe. Nothing is left out here.
I
So
believe they're going to be covering stuff for the finest. It's going to be covering different conventions and appearances, GI Joe events across the country, and myself. I'm included in this as well. I have my new series of podcasts. They're called the GI Joe Fan Club Live. We had our inaugural episode at AR a couple weeks ago, and there will be an episode probably every 3 weeks or so that will be streamed and posted on the GI Joe Fan Club Facebook page, and when we get the YouTube channel working right, it'll be on the YouTube channel as well. And we have discussions about different subject matters that are involved with the GI Joe brand as a whole. We're discussing the comics, the animation, the toys, the history, the heritage, the preservation, action force, packaging, you name it. We have guests like Kurt Busiek, Carson Metaxas, Roger Taft, Dan Klingensmith, James Kavanaugh, myself, Jason Morrell, and Jason Packard are all going to be rotating hosts. Every episode will have a different assortment of hosts with a special guest, and those episodes will be every 2 or 3 weeks. Oh, I forgot we got an episode with Buzz Dixon. So that is for members of the GI Joe fan club. Exclusive to you guys, you'll be able to get access to that content and learn more about GI Joe.
that yeah, I think it's wonderful. I really do. And I know that a lot of that was a real American hero stuff, and I can't reiterate this more. It's not just going to be real American hero. There's Adventure Team, there's 12-inch stuff or Super Joe stuff. We're going to cover everything. We want this to be all inclusive. And I myself am a 12-inch collector, so those are my keys. So all welcome, everybody. So okay, so if you want to find that again, that go search up. You can go look up James Kavanaugh, and he can link you there, or you can look up GI Joe Fan Club Mobile Strike Force, and there's a website out there for that, and as well as a Facebook page, and you can follow those two there. So.
All right, so I think we covered all the business at hand. So suffice it to say, Rising Sun Publishing has been doing GI Joe comics. I vaguely had a recollection of these because I'd seen them and I was like, what is this? What is this about? Since about 1996. We're now in 2022, about to hit 2023. 25 years or more, you guys have been doing GI Joe comic books. And I barely knew about it. So we need to get these fans some information so they know, because you got a lot of material. I was going through the website, like I said, with my partner to give them Christmas ideas. There's some fantastic stuff in there. Action Force, the declassified Action Force, 10 volumes. 3 of them you can get already that are complete, and the others are all on pre-order where you can get them as they come out. There's the Millerverse, which is had to do with the crossover, the Hasbro Universe crossover from probably about 5 or 6 years ago. They tried to cross over all their properties at IDW. And you guys kind of worked in between the cracks of this crossover and did a lot of your own material. And that's the Millerverse.
Yeah, Millerverse was actually that was older. It's older. It's like 2006.
Wow.
We did the crossover long before Hasbro ever thought about it.
Oh.
So we're dealing in the Devil's Due era. That is where that crosses over. But yeah, it's out there. It's called the Millerverse. Go to the website, click on Millerverse, you see all the books. I think there's 55 issues, variant covers, and you can find that stuff there.
And on top of that, if that weren't awesome enough, all that material, you did 100 issues of Cobra, if I'm not getting the name right. Cobra
The
something,
enemy.
huh?
Cover the enemy.
Public Enemy, right? 100 issues.
Right. Okay, so here's the fun, right? So this is my pet project, Cover the Enemy. And so many people don't know about this. And you're so missing out. Like it's so interesting as to what it is. So first off, this is an archiving effort. I want to be clear. This is an archiving effort. So this is archiving what fans have done online and in our community for other fans. So what we did in Cover the Enemy was we went back and because I'm a little bit of an archivist and I save a lot of stuff. Probably, yeah, you too. So everyone said that, oh, it'll always be there. The internet never loses anything. I'm sorry to tell you, that's not true, guys. It's not. Like the Wayback Machine has been broken for a few years now. Stuff is falling off. Things are going away. Like it's gone. There's stuff that is completely gone that we can't even find relevance of anymore. And this is going to be covered in a few articles of, if you can hold up your after action report too. There's an article in here called The Lost Books. And we're going to cover some more of that stuff and how that got lost in there. So our part one is in that book about the lost books. So what's happened is that stuff began eroding away. And come to find out, like I was talking to Josh about it, about all of this lost data. And he goes, I have no idea. And then I was talking to everyone else, and they're like, well, you're the expert. And I'm like, I'm the expert. Wait a second. I'm the expert. Are you certain? Let's look for someone else. But I guess I am. I guess I am the expert on all this stuff. So what I did is I began archiving material that was created online. And Rising Sun had a part in that, of materials that were created, comics that were created online for fans, and comics that were put out there for our community to consume in different formats. And I said, okay, we've got all of this. And there's so many interesting people that have actually contributed to it. So I found an early version of Ryan Lord. And if you don't know who Ryan Lord was, he's actually working for 2000 AD. He draws that book now.
Wow.
So Ryan Lord actually is a big G.I. Joe fan, and he wrote a book early on. It was probably like 97. So there's a 97 version of G.I. Joe comic that he had done. Sadly, that one is not in this series. I asked him and he said, I'd much rather you not, because his artwork has changed so much. That Ryan Lord to this Ryan Lord, they're two completely different people, right? So it's the same person, but their art has changed so much. So this is an archiving material. So if you pick up issue 1 and you go through those issue 1 to 100, you're going to get all kinds of different stories. You're going to get stories that were created way back when, and it's archiving material of putting these fans' content in a book, in a comic book format. That way the G.I. Joe fan, you the consumer, can flip through it and read. And it covers everything. It covers all aspects of G.I. Joe. There's literally stories about G.I. Joe Extreme. There's stories about Renegades. There's stories about every facet of G.I. Joe. Sigma 6 included, all of it is all included in these. And you're going to get just a gambit of everything. So there's comedy, there's action. It's everything all inclusive, as well as we even actually, because that archive is so extensive, we went out and started creating Blast from the Past, which would show some comic art or so art that was done by our community, back then. So you might even see, an ad for 2002 Comic Con where they had drawn G.I. Joe on the front of it, which you might not be able to find anywhere else, in that. So these stories are really they're for fans by fans. So the first 50 issues is really kind of like gearing up. And you'll notice as you start out through it that it starts off, some of the stuff is a little rough. People are a little young in what they're doing and not really understanding. But as you go further in the series, things get better and better and better and better. And by the time you get to past issue 50, you start to see a whole different scale of where the community had grown from its beginning to now. It's really interesting because there's so many things that it houses that people don't realize. First off, this is that it's the longest running fan comic ever. There's nothing out there that comes even close. Those longest running fan comic ever. Number two, it has the first 3D comic ever that was ever printed. It's in this book.
I thought there was a 3D comic in the 80s through
Was there? I might stand corrected then if there's a 3D comic in the 80s, guys, but I know
it
it's
was a
the first
miniseries, 4-issue miniseries.
3D comic.
Yep.
So it'd be the first G.I. Joe 3D comic. So I stand corrected on the first ever, but first G.I. Joe comic.
I don't know if it's in volume 1 or volume 2 of After Action Report. I think he's got it in volume 1, Josh and Roger.
Oh, no, 3D? Oh, no. Wrong 3D. No. I'm not talking three-dimensional. I'm not talking what you're talking about is Blackthorn Publishing put out 6 issues of 3D comics. This is what I'm talking about is computer generated imagery comics.
Oh, CG comics.
CG comics. It's the first, it's kind of like the first ever. It's the first time it ever comes on the scene. And they weren't even printing CG comics back then. So G.I. Joe kind of houses the first one, and it's actually showcased in this series of CTE, Cobra the Enemy. So it holds that regard, as well as there's so many different stories, that it was there's a point in the book where you start to see where the fan community had done it first, and then people like IDW start to do their own versions afterward. You see that over and over and over again. So there's several things in there like Small Joe's. Is it called Small Joe's? Little Joe's. Little Joe's by Brock Jr. We made sure that we got permission. That was actually on one of the early websites of our time, sergeantsavage.com, I think it was, which was around in 98, 99. So that's a 6-issue series. The 6th issue never come out. It only come out in Rising Sun. The other 5 issues were actually put on Sergeant Savage, which is now a defunct site. You can't find them. So the only place you can find them is here. We did contact Sergeant Savage, the owners over there, and we contacted Brock Lee and make sure that he was okay with us putting it out. So you're getting a lot of different stories. You might pick up your book and you might have, 2 backup stories, a main story and 2 backups. So if you're watching, and you can actually go to our website, which is risingsuncomics.com, and you can go and you look at some of these stories. A lot of people think that is the complete story. Because originally we posted just the first main story of the book. So a lot of people think that's the full book, but it's not the full book. There's actually always a backup story. There's always extra content inside the book. So if you're reading those online, that doesn't give you the full picture of what the total book is. There's usually a backup story in every single issue.
What's the page count on an average issue?
36 issues or 36 pages. And then when we get to issue 50, it goes up to 40 pages.
Is there ads in this?
Yeah, a few.
There's a few ads in a 48-page comic book. That's a lot of content.
It is a lot of content. And the thing about it is I get to issue 100 and I could have kept going. I could have kept going to archive more. But I felt like that I needed to kind of stop at that point and take a step back and say, okay, we've done 100 issues of fan content. I would really like for the fans to partake and really consume this, and buy issues and put them in their collection and go that. And we do have people that call us and say, hey, I want a full 100 issues. And I'll be like, okay, sure, great. I'll get you a package deal, and let's go about that. Because I want it to be in the hands of fans. It's meant for fans. So by the time you get to issue 50, it changes. It changes somewhere around like 52 or something like that. And the series takes on a different tone. At this point, the the archiving of what it once was changes into something different. And you would be really surprised who is fans of G.I. Joe. Fans would submit their work and we would put them in the book. So you have all kinds of artists that were fans of G.I. Joe. Ron did a piece in here. I think it's issue 77.
Ron
Uh,
Rudat?
yes,
Wow.
Brandon Jerwa has written many pieces for this book. Herb Tempe had done a piece. And I think there's even some older works of Larry and a few other people that had really committed to this fan base. They were fans. So I didn't want to do anyone disservice, and I wanted to make sure that I got everything out there that I could. So we're up to 100 issues of the series. After 55, you start seeing some of the people that wanted to come in afterward. They saw what we were doing and said, "Hey, I want to contribute. What would you like for me to do?" And I would say, "Hey, write us a story that you want to see done. Can you pencil this book that was written by one of the fans?" So that content was actively put together, and it does kind of stand on a little higher quality because there's that effort of being put into it. So you start to see that change about around issue 50. And it's exciting to me. It is exciting to me, to put that much work into it. I really want you guys to consume and love it. Every story through CTE is meant to be a take it or leave it continued. If you don't see it fitting in your Marvel A-Raw, don't put it in there. It's that simple. If you see it fitting, great. If you think it fits in the Sunbow universe, I'm happy. Enjoy it, read it, put it in.
There's an interesting thing because Larry is always adding to his original run because they did the 2-pack and 3-pack comics that were out in the 2000s, and he did stories in those comics, and they slide into his continuity of his original run. And in fact, they put prestige format omnibuses out, not omnibuses, but nice volumes of trade, and they incorporated those comics. So that stuff that was done 20 years later was incorporated into the official continuity because Larry wrote it and stuff like that. And so a lot of this material that you're talking about sounds like it could fit right into continuity, slide right into whatever place that it needs to fit. What have you done to try to have that happen?
To have it officially fit into the community, that was never the focus. It was never the focus it was always the intent that we wanted the reader to decide as to whether or not it fit in their continuity. Every piece is meant that way. So you might read a piece and you say, "Oh, this is Ron worked on this. Brandon Jerwa wrote it. Maybe it's I think it's official, and therefore it's going to slide into the official story continuity." And every single piece is intended that way because we don't just deal on just A-Raw. We also deal with G.I. Joe Extreme. We deal with Super Joe. We deal with all of that stuff. It all shows up. Even Action Man shows up.
Wow.
So this is all G.I. Joe together. It was always intended on being that. And I think one of the, and hopefully does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does, because everything you do in life is subject to person's own self reflection on that, subjectivity on that, whatever it is, whether it's film, comics, novels, toys, video games, whatever it is, politics. It's that individual's subjectivity that has to determine what it's going to be in their life. Even toy collecting, to a certain extent, everybody collects G.I. Joe their own way. Some are 100% mint and package collectors from A to Z, ARA only, or some are 60s only, or some are Sigma 6 only. Some are all in to a certain extent, and pieces and parts. And so there's all this subjectivity. So it makes sense that you would have something for the entire audience that everybody can take in, whether they leave the Sigma 6 or whether they leave the Super Joe, whether they leave the 60s Joe or whatever, that's up to that person. But they have a series that it's an anthology series, basically, is what this is. Kind of like what Marvel used to do. Marvel Comics Presents used to be 4 or 5 stories in each issue, went for 150 issues. And maybe one story went 5 issues, one story went 8 issues, one story went 12 issues. There might have been one story that was one issue, but it's all Marvel Comics and it's all in continuity. And this is all G.I. Joe, not necessarily in continuity per se, based off your own views and your own subjectivity. You can include it how you feel that it should be. I think that's an interesting and unique way to do a comic series.
And I think you hit it nail on the head. You might pick up one of these books and you'd be like, oh, it starts here. Is it going to continue? And then it may go for 3 or 4 books, of you where you can read that in that setting, and then it may switch out to a different story. So it does do exactly like the What If series is kind of set up. You come in and you gather up. And what's interesting about that is some people will say, okay, Ron worked on it. It's official. That's good enough to be in my continuity. Other people will say, well, since Larry didn't write Larry didn't write this, it's all of this is out for me, sort of thing. So I think that's where the kind of question becomes. I do want to say that we have really handled this with care. I made sure we handled this with care. We tried not to include characters that were just made at whim, if that makes sense. There's very few original characters in the series. I could probably count them on one hand. And usually it was to move the story forward if it was done. We're talking 50s, from the issue 50 back, whenever people are just wanting to be involved. So there was more of an effort to say, okay, look, no, we're going to try not to, bend the rules so far that everything breaks, but there is some stories that, venture close to that line. So, so very few original G.I. Joe characters were made out of 100 issues, or original characters, and since we try to use what was already there.
That's an interesting thing because IDW came really, really close to breaking it because Larry incorporated obviously G.I. Jane and Joe Colton. And then when he continued, Devil's Due got it, they continued from his and included Joe Colton and G.I. Jane. But they didn't mention much after that. But when they were kind of slid off to the side as a separate future or separate alternate reality, IDW got it, and they had 2 or 3 different continuities, and then they continued Larry's supposedly where Larry left off, and he never used Joseph Colton. He hasn't used Joseph Colton in his series, but IDW did. IDW used them. They used the Adventure Team, Bullet Man. They went back in time and did the Dino. They did so many weird things with their 15-year opportunity that they had that it kind of almost breaks the continuity. So the fact that you guys have things that are in the history of G.I. Joe, the 60-year history that it can fit in, I think that's fine because now we have all this weird material out there that's actual official published. So what you guys put out there, it doesn't actually, it's not necessary, even though it doesn't necessarily have to be viewed as fan fiction. It could be almost viewed as legitimate.
Well, that is a thing for me. And I think I talked about this last time too. The difference between a fan fiction I really wish we had a different name for what we call fan comics, because they are not. That's not the same as fan fiction. I think the workload, the effort, the time, and the energy and the money that goes into it is so much higher. And I know there would be a lot of people that would argue with this point. But there's so much more that goes into it, a lot more time than it does. And I think I covered that in our last segment as well. So I see it as something way different. If you're going to take the time to make a comic, it takes a lot of energy to do. You know.
Well, here's a couple of ideas. Obviously, you're an independent publisher, so these could be just independent comics, or they could be self-published comics. As a self-publisher, I know a lot of self-publishers, so you can look at it instead of calling it fan fiction, call it self-published GI Joe material content, or independent GI Joe published content.
And well, I think that there's a legalese, aspect of all of that, but don't want to get into that for certain. Everyone thinks they're a legal lawyer as soon as you start talking about that stuff. But and we are by no means want to put on any pressure from Hasbro. We love them. We don't want them, beating us up. So,
No, I
um,
don't want them to either because you've obviously been working at this for a lot
so
longer than I ever realized. Like I said, I had a vague recollection that you guys were out there because I'd seen the covers. So what is this? And then I didn't get a close enough look at it. I think I flipped through a handful of issues. I saw it conventions. People had them in comic boxes, and I would like, what is this? And then I would look at it. I said, oh, this is like a fanzine of some sort. I didn't really the negative connotation. I fell for it as well, and that's bad on myself. I didn't open it, read it, look at the material as a proper person would if they read a new comic or pick a new comic up off the comic stands in a comic store or whatever. And I should have done that.
well, I think that, and I'm going to go back to something you said previously. When IDW had started doing some more advanced or bigger concepts and kind of reaching out there, this was not that long ago. Whenever we first started printing, it very much had that kind of feel to it. Like people weren't interested because it was considered, some kind of fan fiction thing going on. But as soon as IDW starts to open the door and they start officially publishing their own little versions and waylays and lines that are headed out in these directions, that kind of changed. I think that the reader now is a little more accepting of anything that goes out there, and I'm glad for it. I am glad for it. This allows GI Joe to grow in different ways that it wouldn't have allowed it any other way. So being able to and it allows a little more acceptance for this. It's hard to say that, hey, it's hard to say that, oh, there's fan fiction that's just ripe, fan comics that are just ripe all over the internet. Not really. No, there's a few, but not many at all. And usually they agree to allow us to publish it in Cover the Enemy. So this is really the place where you get all your kind of fan comics and fan build up of it. I did have a favorite in the series though, and this kind of broke my earlier rule. Um, when I got to issue 99 and 100, I had stuck so closely to not trying to break any continuity in its set, right? You have this and this and this. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do that because that'll hurt that community. I don't want to do this or those guys won't like that. I wanted to kind of keep those parameters in check. But when I got to 99 and 100, I was like, these are my last two issues. I don't think I'm going to come back to this series. What do I want to do? Like it felt like I was in service to the community prior to doing up to that, up to issue 90, 98. It felt like I was really in service to the community. Let me put out what the community wants. Let me gather up the fan content and put it together in this series. So oddly enough, 99 and 100 are my most enjoyable issues. They really are. And what it is this is where I kind of broke what I said earlier. I did create some new characters for it. I created an extension of the October Guard. and created some to kind of fill their roster in it. It's not a huge roster that I'm building, but and actually did a story around them. And it is my most rewarding 2 issues out of the whole series. And I think it's because I created toy product first because I'm a toy designer. So I created toy product of the October Guard, and then I included them in a comic. And that made it so much more rewarding to see them start to come to life, through a media of some sort. So those are my favorite 2 issues, 99 and 100.
There was expansions on that October Guard from the original five or whatever, six people that were in the very first 2 issues of Larry Hama's run. Over the years, they've added. I think they're up to like 12 or whatever. A couple of them died off. Some have actually joined GI Joe. Well, no, they joined GI Joe during Devil's Due, but they
Those
didn't
do.
join Devil's. They didn't join GI Joe during IDW's or Larry Hama's run. So
Correct.
that's it. I won't
Correct.
even go there. But
And they, Larry has added some characters every now and then, to it. And Larry, I love you. If you're watching this, I love you, man. I found the characters a little bland. I wanted something a little more energetic. Give me something that makes sense to the team, not just a repeat, of some of the characters. So
and that's the interesting thing about his recent run. And don't take anything away from Larry. He deserves all the accolades he gets, and he's a now Eisner Award-winning
absolutely,
author.
of course,
So he's phenomenal. But
absolutely.
now that he doesn't have that pressure, I think, of Hasbro pushing him like he did for the first 155 issues, I think he's kind of relaxed a little bit, and now he's letting the stories kind of go a little bit longer. So that is the pace I've noticed, and I kind of almost wish that he was working for Hasbro again, doing that, because the pace of the stories were 2 or 3 issues at the longest.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe I think the one story was the war on Cobra Island, World War III or whatever that was. That was a long story, but most of the stories were 2 or 3 issues at most. And then he had plot threads, but the plot threads were spread out. But that was fine. But nowadays the stories go 15 issues, 10 issues, 5, 6, 7 issues, and I'm like, okay, it's nice.
So Larry and I kind of talked about this a little bit, and he said that he wasn't gonna. We were having a discussion at one of the Joe cons, and I said, I said, Larry, I haven't read any of your work in a while. We both agreed not to read each other's work, until the series were done. My series is done now, so I'm gonna start reading, A-Raw, which I've got them all. I bought them all. I supported the official line, but I haven't read them. So now I'm going to go back and start reading them and see where we've got. But I think that the difference has to do with, and what I'm referring to is design wise. If you're designing a character, Hasbro had, official designers. They had designers that were working on this. And that's nothing against a comic artist. I've seen this too many times. Guys, I love you. I know you're watching this. I love my comic artists. You guys are awesome. But there's a difference between a comic artist and a designer. They are not the same. And they can cross over. They can learn the other side of the field and play the other side of the field. But you have to actively try to. So I see Mattel and I see Hasbro, they do this a lot. They're like, someone with a good pencils will rake in. They'll be like, oh, I'm a designer. But the truth is that they're broken because they don't really know the intricacies of toy design or character design and everything that goes into it. So that what they create is broken in the thought process. You see it in a lot of toys that came out. It's like, okay, what were you thinking? How are they going to play with that? Who's that? What is that necessary for? Did you put any thought into the creation of this character when you were building it? This is something that I felt like Devils do, and I don't know who did their character design. Whoever did that, it feels like they kind of like they had a little bit of design theory behind them to be able to support that. And so that's sometimes what I see in the IDW comic, and I'm not trashing it by any way, no means. I am a fan. Okay, what I see is that sometimes those things are lacking design element on their characters. They become out bland. Their characters are one note. They're falling short. They don't have depth to them. Their design doesn't have depth to them. Their character buildup sometimes gets a little lost. And I can understand that from Larry's point because he's writing 300 characters. I mean, that's a lot. Him himself was, even talked about that multiple times about writing so many characters. It can be really challenging because they start to take on the same personalities over time. So,
But he wrote all their personalities.
right, well, most of them, you
Most
know.
of them. The first whatever I think up through 92 or whatever file cards he did. I don't think he did after 92 because a lot of 92 were repeated like in 93 and 94. So I
Right.
don't think there was too many new ones after that, but he wrote all their file cards. But to your point, yeah, a lot of these comic book people, they don't understand the play pattern of toys, and then the toy developers don't understand the progression of story telling over a certain amount of time and stuff like that, the canvas of us developing a story and arc and things like that. So there are skills in both fields that if you've worked in both fields, you probably have both of these skills. But if you're in one field, you don't have the other skill. And if you're in the other field, you don't have the other skill. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident if you really look at it from those terms. The problem is that a lot of times toy companies will hire illustrators to design toy product, and then the toy product doesn't have what they're looking for. It doesn't have the play value or the depth that it should. But that's toy related stuff. We're talking about this book and GI Joe content. We should get back on that. And I really want you guys to go pick up this series. I put, it's really, there's some really good stories. I will say that we got our hands on some early Sunbow concepts for season 3. So there's like a handful of season 3 stories that fall inside the after issue 50. You start to see some Sunbow season 3 content that they were planning on doing for their show. These would have been the one shot shows that would have been sprinkled out, not the arc pieces, because I think Buzz was basically writing the arc piece that was going to be the main plot out thread for the year. But these are the ones after that. There were several. They had kind of like a list of, I think it was like 12 episodes that they were planning on doing.
Yeah,
So
I think you're right. That's really interesting. So then we can at least get that material in some form. We can read the stories, and they just did that in 4 issue series at IDW, the Saturday Morning Adventures. So it's kind of like a precursor to that. You can get this style
pretty
of
much.
storytelling, uh, and that's unique. That's a whole another audience because there are people that are just dedicated GI Joe animated people, and they won't go with anything else. So that's good. I think that that makes this definitely an anthology, in my opinion, based on everything you've said, and without having an issue in hand. That's what it feels like. It's a GI Joe anthology that covers everything.
And it really does. And there's another point that I want to point out because if you guys may not know, every cover that was submitted for these issues, if you're seeing these issues online, those were actually almost every cover. It's like, I think there's only like 4 or 5 covers, maybe there might be 10 covers total that weren't submitted that may have been created in house. But all of the covers were actually done as a Devil's Duke cover contest,
Wow.
and they picked a cover and they put it actually in the back of the Devil's Due issue. But these were all the other covers that didn't go, and it was like, okay, if we're doing fan content, how do we do fan content to the nth degree? Why don't we use those covers that IDW didn't use? Let's finish them out and let's use them as covers for Cover the Enemy. So if you're looking through there and you're wondering, why did they use this? Why is this being used? That's because it was part of a cover contest that IDW put out. And we said, okay, we're going to use this as an archiving aspect of G.I. Joe one step further.
I'm glad that you're telling me this because I don't think anybody knew that those fans put themselves out there in this contest and they didn't get picked. But this way, they did get picked in
Correct.
a anthology series. That's fantastic. I think that's brilliant. That's one of those fun things, kind of like that you don't know about, and when you hear it, it's just wonderful that the community can be involved. I love that. I love that very much.
Yeah, and the truth is there was probably about another 100 covers that didn't get that didn't get used in this, but we're sorry guys, we just I 100 is as far as I can go at the moment. So
Or you can always put them in a book by itself.
right,
Sometimes there
right,
are charity books with just covers.
yeah,
Like for Heroes Initiative or whatever, they do like a Hulk issue. It's like hundreds of art pieces of covers that people did. You could do the same thing as a Zero issue, Cobra Zero, and do all the covers that never got chose.
yeah, absolutely, and we've discussed that, for certain. I see it as I see it as a working my team, that helps me put it together. We work on it together, and there's always that. We're still in currently with the book, we're still in creation of some of the very final issues. So 99 and 100 are still still in production sets right
Oh,
now. So there's several issues that are still in production.
okay.
And if you're wondering what happened with the pre-order, so we actually opened this up to pre-order many years ago. And we took money early on with the pre-orders. We do have records of all of that. We are keeping track of it. We're going to fulfill every single one that we've taken money for. Um, and we are keeping track of those. It's just that with the fan content and the way that this is set up, this is fans donating their time. It does take longer to be able to produce a printed book, but your money has helped see this series through, and we will print every issue. It will go out as said. So there's that going on. Once they're out, we will be putting the other the issues online for purchase, as well as we will be. I think we might do some digital. So if you guys are wondering why don't the Rising Sun do digital on these books, we probably will do digital, but right now it's not the primary focus. We're really focusing on the subscribers that supported us. Once that gets done, we'll put together a team that's going to go through and work together to get PDF versions where you can buy off the site. And then allow us to continue selling at least digital versions of the books.
So you have a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to GI Joe, and you've stopped the Cobra series. Are you at liberty to say what the future holds for GI Joe comics through Rising Sun Publishing?
There's a couple things we've got in the works. One you can already see now. There is the Kickstarter we talked about earlier for Action Force Redux. I believe that Jim Marshall may be taking over. As far as that goes, we're talking about continuing on Action Force Redux if the numbers come in check. If we can get that last issue funded, then we'll continue on. From there, we will be definitely working with the club. And I think that there's a couple projects that we're working on with the club. So let's hold out with that. I can't talk too much about it. What I can say is support this comic. If you could hold that up again, David. Your support in this book will definitely get us maybe another series. So please, when this comes out, it'll be behind. You'll have to join the club, or you pay a more exorbitant price, just like it was with the old club. Join the club, buy this book, put it in your collection, and that'll help to see the numbers to get us another series, which we're putting together. And I think that as Rising Sun has grown, our quality has gotten better and better and better and better. So what we would be putting out would be on par to Action Force Redux. So if you haven't seen the quality on that book,
Really beautiful, glossy, professional art from like Robert Atkins, that high class IDW and Devil's Due art artists and creators. Nice.
that's what we're aiming for. And whatever we do with the club next, comic wise, will be in that it'll probably be in that vein and try and up its scale. So please support that book, Adventures of, and it'll get us our next book. Um, and we will definitely continue printing and publishing GI Joe related content for anyone out there that's interested. We're a great partner to have. We have we can get some pretty good rates, and obviously we also try to promote and push all of our projects.
So, if someone wanted to meet you and get some books from you, or ask you some questions or whatever, talk to you like I did at AR, do you have any appearances coming up that they can do that?
I myself will probably be coming back. I've already booked the booth for Joe Fest for next year, so they're going to be kind of spread out. But Joe Fest, I will definitely be there with a booth for SoCal Joe Show in December. I'll be present down there. I won't have a booth, but I'll be there talking about the club. And so come by and talk to me about the club. And obviously, we can always take orders online and emails so that you can get back to us. I'm going to try to attend. What is it? Is it Joe Fest? Is it which one am I thinking? The one in Atlanta.
Toy Lanta.
Toy Lanta. Joe Lanta. I'm going to try and attend Joe Lanta this coming year.
So Joe Land, I think, is going to be in September. Toyland is going to be in March. So depends on which one. They're both like 12-inch Joe shows, pretty much.
Okay.
No, so that's good. So you'll be at 3 or 4 different shows over the next year in all different areas of the show. You should maybe try to go to Kentuckiana too, because that's more northern too. But
Okay.
if whatever you're able to do, obviously it's all budgeting constraints, and travel and stuff is expensive. It was a lot more expensive to get to AR this year than it was the previous year and stuff like that.
When
But
when does Kentuckiana go off?
it's the end of July. It's always the last weekend in July.
Okay.
But they booked a bigger venue, and it was really nice. This last one I went to was the best one that I think they've done. They're gonna split it, and I really wish they wouldn't split. I wish they would just do the one and make it a nice big one. But it's not the same as like Joe Fest. It's not the same as Assembly Required. It's not the same as SoCal. It's got its own thing. It's not the same thing as Toylanta either. It's its own thing. But there's a bunch of the same people that go to it that are in the community. Jason Morrell is there. James Kavanaugh goes to it, and a bunch of the other vendors and stuff that are in the community go there as well. So it's kind of like seeing your old friends every time you go to these things.
Yeah. Well, that's why we always go, right? It's not just about buying products. So if you're going to go to a Joe show of any kind, it's not about just buying product. Yes, you're going to buy stuff and you're going to enjoy what you buy, and it's going to be a fun time. But it's also about it's also about meeting people in the community. So if you're watching this and you haven't been yet, most of us have been. Go sit down, talk to people. Almost everyone's going to be pretty open and positive. We have a really good community of collectors and people where they're pretty accepting. So
Yep. And I don't think it's too divisive anyway. I think everybody accepts that there's different versions of GI Joe, and they're fans of those versions. And there's fans that love all of it. So I think that's the interesting thing about our community. So I'm very in agreement with you on that. Uh, but I want to say thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to speak with me on this episode, GI Joe discussion. We covered a lot of different things, and I'm looking forward to the future with Rising Sun and all these projects, because it's making me as a Joe fan very excited. So
thank you.
I will talk to you again for part 3 of this series in the future. And I thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Bye, everyone.